like to welcome everybody to our invoice training today. Appreciate you taking time out of your days to come. Hopefully that you'll find that this is informational and of value to you. One of the main goals that we have for the invoice training is to get consistency in all the invoices that we do in UDOT. I think if you've done business at UDOT and you do business in Region 1, they might ask for a little something different on their invoices than they do on Region 3. And as a consultant, that can be quite confusing. I'm not saying either region does anything wrong. They've done what they've been told and what they understood at the time. But this is, I think there's been enough turnover and there's been enough time that we've done this that this will help get us hopefully some consistency throughout the state. So it doesn't matter what region you're working in, you'll have the same expectations of what you should be putting on your invoices and how they will be reviewed, and hopefully that helps those invoices sell through for both UDOT and for the consultants and for you guys to get paid, because I understand that that's the livelihood. Before we get going here, I'd just kind of like to go around and do introductions a little bit, so everybody knows who's everybody is. My name is David Schwartz. A little bit about me: I've worked in Region 2 for the past 20 plus years, and now I'm at the complex. Coming to the complex, I saw how Region 2 did it, and now I'm starting to see how the other regions do things, and so I was looking at the invoices and thought this might be a good place to start. So I asked our comptrollers and our consultant services folks to come up with some checklist or some tools and some trainings to help us out in the state. So that's who I am. This is...
I'm Annette Chella. I'm with the Comptroller's office. We do make your payments. I'm the job share email, or Annette Chella, and I can give you my contact information later if you'd like to have it for, if you need to have, if you have any questions or, concerns.
I'm Gay Hetrick with Consultant Services at Central.
I'm Shauna Crowther, and I'm the other half of the job share.
So part of this training is to get your questions answered if you have questions. So please feel free to ask as we're going along, and we'll try and answer your questions. If we don't know the answer, then we'll get it and get back to you. So with that, we'll start our training. I'll turn it over to the gals in our comptroller's office.
Okay. So this is a quick overview of what we're going to be going over today. We're going to be going over the Comptroller's Office requirements and procedures, consultant services requirements, QC/QA, and we're doing this to provide consistency across all regions when submitting documents and to ensure compliance with the consultant services regulations. Okay, so we'll start with payment request forms. This is the required information and things that we frequently see mistakes on. The pay request number is required, and it's very important for us because if there's a misnumbering or if there's a jump in the number, we track every single payment that comes through. So if we miss one, we'll be calling saying, why didn't we get this pay request? Or if you mark one as final and we have one missing, we won't final out the contract until we get every pay request. So the pay request number is very important. The contract number and the project number are both important because that's how we cross-reference to make sure that we're paying the right invoice with the right pay request to the correct contract. The fee type would be like cost plus or fixed, unit price, and that's important because there's different requirements for each one of those. So we need to know that that invoice is the correct format for that fee type, and the consultant name is more of a, if you guys have DBAs or, partner companies, we need to know which company is on the contract. So if there's, multiple companies that are all one company, it has to be the name of the that's on the contract. We'll have to send it back if it's one of the other companies. So, the percent billed needs to be filled out. That's also important for closing. So if you have 100% billed but you don't mark it final, we'll send it back and find out why, or call and find out why. So that one's important for that. And the current amount due must match the invoice. That's the most important one. That's where we get the most problems. We have to have those match exactly. So if on your invoice you need to include your fixed fee amount and your overhead, all that needs to be included on your invoice and your pay request form.
Just to clarify on percent billed.
Yes.
If your contract's $100,000 and you've only billed $100,000, but your last invoice, you still need to be putting 100% billed on it.
If you know it's going to be a final invoice, but it's not completely billed out, you still have money left over. If you know it's going to be a final, we want it to say 100% billed, so that we know that this is okay to final out, and you're not going to send any more bills through for it.
And then don't send any more bills through.
Yeah, and then don't send any more bills through for it. So this is the pay request form. There's only been one minor adjustment to this, and we've taken off the bottom signature line for the the UDOT project manager. We're having them fill out a new form now, which you'll see later on. And so they have to sign that form, so we've just taken off the signature line. The other thing that's changed is we've added this to it's like a second page for your pay request forms. This is going to be information for the consultants to look at. These are all the things that we're requiring on the invoice and the pay request form from the consultants. So these are things that we need you to look through, make sure it's there, make sure it's correct. Yes?
When are these new forms supposed to be being used?
We're gonna have them start being used as of May 1st.
But you can
So,
start now. if you
They
want.
are out on our website right now, so if you want to start using them now, you can.
One thing we want to stress is we hope these are a tool to you so that you know what we're looking at and what you should have in your invoices. So if you turn in a form after May 1st that's not this form and it's the previous form, we're still going to accept it. We're not going to reject a payment based on that.
Right.
This is a tool for you.
Yeah. The second page is just information for you. These are the things that we're that we're checking to see are there, and that we hope that you'll check to make sure are there before you send them in, to try to get them more correct as we're sending them in. And this is the work task order pay request form, and with this one we also took off the UDOT's PM signature. This one we want you to keep an eye out and make sure that you're putting your correct program and phase on it, and the correct work task order, the start and end date, and then also on this authorized number, a lot of people are not sure what that is. That's for your program number. So that's what that one is for. So on the consultant invoices, these are the requirements for your consultant invoices. There are also things that we find problems with, the ones that are more highlighted. So again, the consultant name needs to match what's on the contract. So it can't be one of the other companies that are also involved. We would like to have a remit to address. A lot of companies have more than, they have satellite companies. They'll have ones in Salt Lake, and then there's something, another city that, or state. So we need a remit to address of where you want the check to go to if you're not on EFT. The contract number needs to be on there so that we can cross-check it with the payment request form and make sure they match. The invoice number, we've had a few, we used to have a few that wouldn't send in invoice numbers. We used to create an invoice number for them, and we no longer can do that. So every invoice has to have a unique invoice number. So you can't reuse invoice numbers. Our system that we put them into tracks them. So if we try to reuse one, it won't let it go through. The project number is the same as the contract number. We have to be able to cross-reference it with your pay request form to make sure the right invoice was submitted with the right pay request form. And again, the current invoice amount needs to match the pay request form no matter what. If it doesn't, we'll send it back. And the time period covered, we want the beginning and end date. We have a lot where we get the end date, where it's just, this is through this date. We want the beginning and the end date of the invoice. We need that for federal accounting purposes, so.
One question I've had on that is, would you prefer to see on the first pay request, the NTP date? So say NTP is the 12th, would you prefer to see that invoice from the 12th through the end of the month, or is it okay to have it say the 1st?
It has to say the NTP date on the first one, right?
No, we've said that's the work period.
Right.
But we've had a lot of requests for us to have both dates on there.
Okay.
So you'll see a change maybe in the 6-month mark, where we add an additional date on there to show the NTP date versus the start of the work date.
Right. As of right now, it should be the start of the work period to the end of the work period on the pay request form.
So let's just clarify that. You're not allowed to bill for anything prior to the NTP date.
Right.
So the invoice date beginning date should not be before that NTP date. So if the first day that you have anything billed is on that NTP date, then you're okay, right? And so that would be your NTP date. But say you don't start work until a couple days after you get notice proceed, then your invoice date would be that first date that you start to have work on until the last date that you're billing for on that invoice. So if you get NTP on the 12th and you don't start work until the 14th, then your beginning date would be the 14th, and say you go till the 30th on that month, then your last day would be the 30th. Okay? Okay.
Did you have a question?
Yes, so, sometimes we don't get a hotel receipt until the next month, and so the labor's all billed, say in January, but I don't get the January hotel receipt until the February one.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, what, do you want the invoice to go back instead of saying,
Do we want it to overlap is what you're asking?
yes?
Yes. Because you're billing for something during the period, so you would have to.
Okay.
I don't know that it would matter either way, right?
Well, we're supposed to put the first date that has anything's been done.
Mhm.
So if it was the prior month, we'll still have to put that date in, so
Okay.
yeah. Alright, any other questions on the invoice part?
Will these slides be available?
Yes. Yeah, I think we have them out on, do we have them?
Not yet. We're gonna wait until the last training session.
Okay.
But this recording will also be posted, so after that as well.
Okay, and this is just a sample invoice that's on our website under the consultant services forms. This just shows you where they have a beginning and end date. They have like the project number and invoice number on there, so it's just kind of a sample for you guys. Let's see. The backup documentation requires your sub-consultant invoices, your direct expense reports, and your labor reports, which Gay will go over a little bit more in detail later.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about final payments. So when you send in the final payment on the pay request, it should be marked as final. That's the only time you mark it final. Sometimes we get them marked final and they're not, their contract is still ongoing. And I think some people get confused and think that that's the final for that pay request. Please don't mark it final unless the contract is ready to be closed. We also need the final evaluation in order for us to mark it final. Once we get both of those, we do release what's called an encumbrance, which is any money that you had left over on the contract will be released back.
Not to your pool dollars.
Just to clarify.
Not to- okay. So please make sure that when you mark a payment as final, that there is also a final evaluation. Usually the PM does it though, right?
Right.
So usually your project manager will take care of that for you, so,
You should get a copy of it, though. I mean, your project manager should get a copy.
any questions? Okay. So we're gonna talk about the end of the year. I think the state end of year is different from most of yours. Our end of year is June 30th. So we need to have all charges for end of year, up to June 30th, to the project manager early in July, and we'll let you know of the exact dates for that. But the PM, the project manager, or the project manager's specialist here at UDOT must submit the pay request from you guys once they receive it from you to us early in July so that we can get those paid for the old fiscal year before we start the new year. And it's really, really important that we meet those deadlines because it affects our funding from the legislature. So if we have a lot of payments out there that we haven't been billed, it's not good for us. So less funding means less projects, which means less work. So please make sure that you get all of your invoices in for work done before June 30th, early in July, please.
Does everybody understand that?
Yeah, but it's hard to do.
It's hard to do.
It's hard to beat that early July deadline.
It is. And it's hard for Artie here. And because every invoice that comes through comes to Artie. It's going to get even harder here. You're going to hear about how much harder it's going to get a little bit. But it's very important for us to have. One of the bigger budgets in the state is the transportation budget. And when the transportation budget's so big, it becomes kind of a target at the legislature to look at, hey, can we take money from there and put it somewhere else? And when we say that we're gonna spend X number of dollars this year, and we don't end up spending them, the legislature looks at that and says, well, you didn't really need that much, so maybe we can take some of that money for a $10 million pipeline or something out, which has happened. That actually happened. They took money from us. What happens is at the end of the year, we got to have all of our bills in so that it goes against that year. Otherwise, if we don't get the end of the year and it goes against the next year's bills, and we're perpetuating that and saying, well, we were going to spend this much money and we really didn't, when in actuality we really did, but now it's counting against the next year's. And so we've had the luxury of not getting in a lot of trouble that way, but it's getting more and more so that we could get in trouble there. So this is not something that UDOT's come up with, the comptrollers. This is something that's a statewide accounting thing that we have. And like I say, Artie hates it too because every single invoice comes through her office and everybody's trying to get them there. If we aren't going to get them in, they've got some workarounds for that. But last month, how many end of year invoices did you still get for the month? Or for
Just
20?
last week it was about 8 to 10. I'm getting 8 to 10 per week, and some were from April of last year. So they're holding on to payments way too long.
So when you say it's hard, yeah, but it shouldn't be that hard.
No.
Okay? That's not acceptable in my mind.
Mm.
And in the contract's mind, it's not acceptable either because you're supposed to have it in within 45 days. That's in the contract.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, it kind of pushes it up a little bit more. It's not these guys trying to be difficult. It's a state law requirement. And that's kind of what we want to get through to you, that when we're doing this, and if it affects our funding, it ultimately comes back and affects your firms too. It all kind of trickles down all the way around. So it's in all of our best interest to get it in time.
So if you have a consultant or a sub-consultant that's doing work up to June 30th, and you know you're not going to be able to get your invoice in, but you have an amount or an approximate amount, please let Artie Johnson know, or your PM, so that we can put it on our accrual accounting spreadsheet that we keep, so that we have an idea of how much money we are actually going to be spending for that fiscal year. So if you can't get it in, you just absolutely can't, please let somebody know and with the amount so that we can get that taken care of, at least make a record of it. Yes?
Can I add something to that? So, last year, June 30th, 2016 was my first year-end processing with UDOT. And we had a few projects that were out for mod, and so we weren't able to invoice, and then we got the mod after year-end. And in my own error, I had tried to submit, like I do any other time that there are several months, all of the charges up to date. And then I had to redo them. And I'm assuming that this is how you'll continue to want this, where one invoice needs to be submitted through year end, and then a second invoice for charges from July 1st going
Right, and
forward.
here we are.
Oh, perfect. Sorry.
No, you're
Nope,
good.
you're fine.
Right on. That was
That's a great
perfect.
question.
So I just skipped the year-end state law. If you guys want to read that, you should have that in your handouts.
Actually, they don't.
Oh, they don't? Oh, okay. I can leave it here if anybody wants to read it for a minute.
Or
Basically,
you
it's
can
just
look online.
Utah
for the-
code annotated. So it is state law. It's not something that we just made up, like Dave said. So, any other questions about that? Okay, so in the past, we did have some consultants that were submitting split year-end invoices, which means it covered old year and new year for the state old year and state new year fiscal. What happens is when we try to negotiate or calculate the fixed fee and the overhead rate to split those years out, because they have to be accounted for in the right fiscal year, it's too time consuming for us, and it doesn't match up with what's submitted. So from now on, you absolutely have to split it. Anything that is before June 30th must be billed separately than anything after July 1st. So they can't come in like this anymore. If it does come in like this, we will kick it back. So please make sure that all work performed before June 30th is billed on a separate invoice. And all work billed after July 1st is also billed on a separate invoice.
Another change that we're making is that if you have a couple of days that are in the end of June that are in a different pay period or something, we used to allow you to bill it in July, you know, and just say, oh, a couple of days, it doesn't matter. No longer. They have you, even if you have to issue an invoice for 2 days worth of labor to get it to June 30th, we want you to do another invoice. So that wasn't me, that was them. Anyway.
Any questions on that? Okay. Do you want to do this? Sure. Okay.
So we've created some new pay request guides for everybody. These are available on the Consultant Services website. A lot of these would be more angled towards the UDOT project managers. But you guys are welcome to look at them and look at all the requirements that we have. So the first one is the pay request guide. It's a 4-page guide. The first 2 pages of it are the Comptroller's requirements, and the second 2 pages are for consultant services. So this kind of goes through step by step of like everything that we expect to see on a pay request or an invoice. We've put together just like a small example, a piece of it. So this would be like the example from ours for invoices. We expect, you know, the company name, remit to address, contract number, invoice number, project number, and so on. So it's for everybody's information. These are all the requirements for this. So it's just for informational purposes. You're more than welcome to look at them anytime, and you can call us and ask us any questions you have. This is a new requirement that we are giving to the UDOT project managers. Once you guys have turned in your pay request forms and they've gone through and checked them, they have to fill out this new form right here that says that they've gone through and they've done a quality control check and a quality assurance check. The part that would affect the consultants the most is this bottom section right here. This is if they find any errors on your invoice or anywhere in the invoice or the pay request, and they have to do handwritten changes, they now have to send it to you guys and have you sign off on all the changes that they've made.
So occasionally, on our backup documentation, we will have to, like, as, what would you call it, the invoice preparer, we will find errors. And so we, as of right now, I will do like a strike through and initials, like my initials for Horrocks Engineers. Would this pertain to that as
No,
well?
because it would have been changed prior to you guys signing the payment
Okay.
request.
Yeah, these are changes after they've been sent to us, so that, like if the PM is going through it and doing a quality control check and they say, oh, well, this invoice from a subcontractor wasn't added up correctly on the invoice, and they find it, a lot of times they would write in the changes. So we're now asking them to get a signature from you guys saying that you're okay with the changes that they've made.
Or they could just kick it back and you guys revise
Yeah,
it.
or just have you guys redo it. So that's,
And so
Yeah.
on that signature, does that have to be our project manager or can it be the accountant?
Good question.
It doesn't really matter, just someone from your office. Part of the issue is we cannot, the PM cannot change the invoice and add more to your invoice, but they can add less.
Right.
And so if you're expecting a payment of $10,000 and you only get $9,000, at some point you're gonna say, what happened to the other $1,000, right? And so this would all be notifying you in advance saying, hey, we found an issue, you can resubmit the whole invoice, or if you're okay with me just striking it out and giving you less, here's how much less you're gonna get. At least you know about it at that point in time,
right.
rather than being surprised later on in your books. And so that's part of the reason that signature's there. So they just send you this form, you'd sign it. So just as
And-
long as your company knows about it.
And the UDOT PM has the discretion as to whether or not they choose to do that or just reject it, send
Yeah.
it back?
If it gets too cumbersome at some point, there's a break point.
Yeah,
no,
there's
if
too
it's
many
just a small
errors.
change, then.
If there's too many errors, we'll just send it back and have you guys redo the whole thing.
And this
Sometimes
is-
it's just one or two, it's not. a big
This
deal.
is partially brought on by if the changes are going above what your invoice is. Before we weren't able to do it at all, we had to just kick it back. The auditors told us that if we had something signed by you guys saying that you were okay with us making that change, then we could do that. So that's why we put this in here. But now we're requiring it for any handwritten change. But before it was just for changes above what the invoice was, because the auditors needed that. But now we're requiring it for any handwritten changes. So,
That changes the amount.
yeah, it changes to the amount. Yeah, if it's changes to other portions of then it's, yeah.
I was gonna tell you guys something, sometimes when we change them, and the PMs change them, you guys don't always know that we've made the change, so your cumulative total on every invoice after that is wrong. So we have to go and manually change every single invoice afterwards. So it's easier for us if you guys know about it, you guys put it in your system, and the next invoice will be right. So it's easier for us if we go back to you guys and say, here's what we found, can you guys make the change? Because it saves a lot of changes on our end, so.
And with us also, because if our cumulative amount is different from yours, we're looking to see if there was a payment missed somewhere. So it does help if you guys sign off on it.
On the other hand, though, if we don't wanna hold up a $500,000 invoice for a couple of pennies, that might be wrong. So if we can fix it and work it out amongst ourselves and have you sign this, just make that payment, and then make sure that the next one is correct, that makes
Well,
sense.
as long as an accountant can sign, we can probably get a faster signature than trying to hunt down some of our PMs, so
Yeah.
that would be okay too.
Yeah.
Well, and hopefully that'll be easier, because in the past, we've had to send it back, and then you have to get new signatures,
Yeah.
and that's, that's a pain, so.
Alright, and then this one is also just a tool for the PMs and consultants, for UDOT to go through. You guys can look through this and, see what we're requiring them to do. Once they get the payment requests in, you can see what they're required to look at. There's some that are like, the pay request has to be within 45 days of the work performed. The work wasn't performed before the NTP, things like that. That you guys will probably have on your checklist too. So these are the same list that you have on the back of the pay request form. It's separated out a little bit differently, but this is just a tool for everybody to look at. And it's also available on the website, so.
What if we can't get it within the 45 days?
Go back to that.
One more.
Right, no, that's good right there. Pay request is within 45 days window of the work performed. If not, please state reason why it is late on a separate sheet. So what we're telling, you can either do that and let the PMs know about it, and one way you can do that is on this pay request.
Right here.
On this pay request form, if you want to add things down here at the bottom for that reason, for the PM on their
On this
signature.
form up here.
Yeah.
On this.
For the PM, they can write in this area as well what that reason was. So, you're kind of being held accountable for why that is. Oh, we went on vacation and that doesn't really hold up real well. But sometimes there are reasons and that go along with it, so we want to be flexible there. But
We will occasionally have slower months on some of our projects, and so our teams will elect to hold off on sending an invoice. Is that okay? Or should we really be pushing even on, small amounts? And in that case, what is a small amount?
We have a month where we only have like 2 hours to build, and it's kind of like,
Yeah.
costs us more to send in an invoice than a job.
you will not hear in this training from us to tell you to go outside the contract. The contract says within 45 days. So that's what we're gonna tell you in this training, is stick to the contract.
Wink, wink. Year end though. No,
Regardless.
Well, right.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
I'm just curious, so once we submit it, is there a time frame that the project manager or UDOT should approve it and
6 months should do
have it
it.
back?
Yes, there is a
Hope
time
not.
frame for that.
And what would that be, sir?
Brent, what's your expectation for your PMs here?
That's where I was heading here.
She asked, once they turn it in,
What's your deadline?
what's the time frame that you're given your PMs to turn it around?
It depends on the invoice. Most of my PMs will have their invoices paid within 2 weeks, except for when they're not right, and we have to return them and ask for something. If you return it back to us, then we process it. If in a month we have to send you another email saying, can you please get me something that we're waiting for? We actually stamp it and document it, how many times it goes back. So if you guys turn it back right away, they are normally processed within 2 weeks. They hit my desk and everything is processed that Thursday before I go home. So most of the times, at the most, they will be here 3 weeks. But that depends on if it's a good invoice or not.
Yeah, well, if the invoice gets sent back,
The time starts.
when I was in Region 2, my expectation of my project managers, and did they meet it all the time? They didn't, was 2 weeks. Okay? That was for a good invoice. If they had to send it back and they got it back, then the time started all over, as far as I was concerned. Each region's a little bit different on how they do that. I've had some turned in and they would like it turned around in 3 days.
and it took him 3 months past the time, and I said, excuse me, but that doesn't sound very fair. That it took you 3 months to get it in, and you expect 3 days. That's not. Are they perfect? They're absolutely not. And so, knowing how you guys have to still kind of, you feel that you have to keep the project managers, you don't want to throw them under the bus so that you can get the next project, right?
We know
You don't want to say anything when it's not getting turned in. But I'm telling you right now that Brent would like to know about that. We understand that that's how you guys get your money, and that's how you put food on your table, and that's how the companies stay in business, and we want the companies to stay in business.
That's why you're doing the work in the first place.
Yeah. So if you're having a problem, my first suggestion would be go talk to the program manager in that region. If you're not comfortable doing that, then go and talk to me, and I can deal with it. I've had cases where I've had people come to me and tell me that because it was a substantial item, but they didn't really want to say anything, and I was able to handle that without saying that the consultant came talk to me and found out you're not turning your invoice in and there's an issue. So they never knew that the consultant ever came and talked to me. So we can do it discreetly too. So if you're having that, please feel free to come talk to the program managers or to me if you're not comfortable at that point. But yeah, there is an expectation for the PMs to get those turned around in a reasonable amount of time. And reasonable is going to vary a little bit depending, as already said, the size of the invoice and things like that. Does that answer your question without really getting specific? Good, because that's what I wanted to be.
That's your turn,
You guys, is if when you return the invoices, if they're only asking for 1 or 2 items, if you can just return those 1 or 2 items, that helps us out. If you return a whole invoice and you've deleted a whole bunch of stuff or added a whole bunch of stuff, guess what? We're reviewing that whole 200 pages all over again, justifying it all. So if we're only asking for 1 or 2 things, if you guys can help with just sending that without a whole new invoice, but lots of times we get them back and we are reviewing the whole thing over because it went from X amount of pages to like minus 10 more or 10 plus. So we're really starting all over.
And the
So
dollar
you guys can
amounts
help us
change
a
and-
lot.
So if it's just a couple items, then that's fine. But if you start looking at your invoice again and finding other things, I definitely want you to return a whole new invoice.
But just realize that we're gonna have to look at the whole thing all over again.
Okay. So that's going to kind of bring us to the next section that we have. And
I had one more comment or
Sorry.
question on that. So if I have a sub-consultant that's working on our project, I usually will review their invoices kind of like your PM's reviewing ours. I'll make sure that they're billing according to what their agreement type is and such. Do you
So you
want
should.
them, yeah, to make sure they're correct. Do you want us to include their pay rec in our invoice, like within their documents? I have been taking it out because I don't want to confuse their pay rec with our pay rec for the entire invoice. And I wasn't sure if I'm taking that out, if they include a narrative, should that be a part of their invoice? I'm not sure.
I don't think there's a set and fast rule to that. You're trying not to confuse the PMs, and I appreciate that, and I think the PMs will appreciate that too. But you gotta understand that your invoice looks different from their invoice, looks different from their invoice. And so the PM kinda has to figure out what you're doing and how you're doing. And if you think there's a piece of information that they need that's on that pay rec, then I would include it. If it's not and you don't think that it's a value to it and it's not one of those required documents, then maybe you don't. It's gonna be a judgment call.
Or, you know, maybe if you can clarify, like highlight the sub's name or something, just make it clear that it's not the Prime's payment request. But, I don't know. You can write all over it, we don't.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. And your question kind of goes to the next one, which I'm glad to hear. I've heard several comments here. I'm not going to walk over there. about quality control, that you guys have caught some issues on your invoices and you've made changes and you're going back and have the project manager sign them, or that you've checked your subs. That's what you need to be doing. When you guys sign this sheet here, down here, you're saying that your invoice is correct to the best of your ability. We did not put in place a QC/QA measure for you guys to do, because every consultant may have a different way that they do it. There's quality control is not a new thing that's just come up just recently, okay? This is something that we've been doing all along, but there's different levels of quality control, and everybody looks at it and says, oh, this is what quality control and quality assurance is. Even within UDOT, we have different levels of quality control and quality assurance. If I have a bridge and I'm doing bridge plans, if that bridge falls down, somebody might die. So their quality control and quality assurance is much more stringent than an invoices. If you get a number wrong on here, nobody's going to die probably, okay? So the quality control that we do is less on that. We kind of look at it to the effort that we need to have for it. But we still expect it to be a good job. To me, it's pride in your work. I'm doing the best I can, and if I have pride in my work, then I'm going to check that the best I can and move it on with what I know. Are we human? Do we make errors? Absolutely. So what we're asking from you is to do a good check on that, and then at UDOT, we're going to do a check too. And this just kind of goes to the history of quality control. It started back in the 20s, and it's evolved through time. And now there's a ISO 9000, and you can go get certified in ISO 9000 if that really winds your clock in. Good for you if that does. But they've got a national standard. But it seems to be a little bit different, and everybody feels comfortable with a different level of quality control. So for QC at UDOT, it is defined that we will be checking your documents 10 to 20% of the items there, okay? How each region person wants to do that, that's where we're saying. This is the minimum. If they want to do more, they can do more. But we're saying this is the minimum. For me, when I got an invoice and I looked at it, I did 10 to 20%. If I found something wrong, then I would up from the 10 to 20 to 15 to 25% checking. If I found something else, then it upped. When I hit my third, it was like 3 strikes. I'm not looking at anything else on the invoice. I'm sending it back and saying, you guys need to do a better QC/QA on this. And so that was my personal. Some people are more comfortable with less. Some people are reviewing them 100%. I'm not going to tell anybody that they can't review more. But this is the minimum that we expect from our PMs. They're the ones that own the contract. They're the ones that are responsible for that. QA is to ensure that the QC was done. Okay? Once again, different people have different comfort levels with that. But that's the minimum that we're requiring. So I don't know how they want to do it in Region 3. If they want to have the PM put check marks by the items that they check, and then already just go along and look and says, yep, check, 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 yep, they did it, and sign it, since the PM signed it, she can do that, if that's her level of comfort. In Region 2, Vicky's level of comfort is, I'm going to have the PMs do that, but I'm still going to check everything after. Okay? That's her level of comfort before she puts her signature on, and that is fine. More power to her. But the minimum amount that she needs to do is check that. The only exception on this is the unit price contracts. On the unit price contracts, we had an audit done on those, and we made a commitment to the feds that we would spot check them twice. So both the PM and the QCer and QA are doing QC, so that 10 to 20% on those unit price contracts, because that's a commitment we made to the feds on our contracts. Any questions on that? Okay.
Okay, So next section. So the payment request guide that we've posted out there, there's the third and fourth page are consultant services related items. And just to narrow a focus onto one section of it. So we have the section that's for please verify deliverables and level of effort. And received appropriate deliverables, we check the overall level of effort matches the progress report. We check the staff levels are appropriate for tasks performed. For example, the principal's not out there pulling samples, right? We don't want to pay for that level of effort, right? Essentially, we ask our UDOT folks to not overlook the big stuff when they're checking all the details, right? So we want them to make sure that they got the deliverables that they agreed to, that the consultants agreed to pay, give to us for the amount of money that we're paying. So in one situation, I had a project manager call me and say, we've paid out 90% of the contract, but I haven't gotten any deliverables. And I'm like, okay, what do you want me to do at this point, right? I mean, yeah. So anyway, they should be checking all along they're getting the agreed upon deliverables. Contract fee types. We have 3 types of fee types in consultant services. We have cost plus fixed fee, unit price, and lump sum. So just a side-by-side comparison of cost plus fixed fee and unit price. We'll go over lump sum in a minute. So we've got cost plus fixed fees used where the scope of work is indeterminate or kinds of labor, material, and equipment needed are uncertain. And then for unit price, we use that when we have specific items or that we're buying at a set cost. The model on a cost plus fixed fee have, you total up all the raw labor and then you add in the overhead and the profit after the fact there and the other direct expenses. On a unit price one, you include the overhead and profit into a loaded billing rate with the actual labor rate, or I should say the raw labor rate, and you come up with a loaded rate or a negotiated rate. So unit price is generally used when the number of units needed is not known, and on cost plus fixed fee, I guess there isn't one for that. Anyway, consultants bill negotiated or loaded rates for unit price, and on cost plus fixed fee, consultants bill actuals. So once a consultant starts earning a raise, they get paid for that raise on a cost plus, but on a unit price, it's negotiated and set for that contract. So cost plus fixed fee, we use that type when when the scope of work is not well defined, and generally used when the number of units is not needed. When the number of units needed is not known is when we use the unit price. So example of units for unit price is like materials testing or labor hours. So cost plus fixed fee, I talked a little bit about this, pay actual costs for individuals and items. So on labor, as soon as an individual starts making that raise, starts making more money, we start paying for that additional cost. The item, a consultant includes an estimated rate for an item in a contract, but we pay actuals. So if a item is put in the contract at, 70 cents a unit, and after their accounting and everything, it turns out it's 72 cents. We'll actually pay the 72 cents, okay?
Is that on labor and ODCs, that you'll pay the actual rate?
Yes. The only exception is we have some caps for travel, hotel rates, and for mileage rates. For the overhead, on a cost plus fixed fee, the overhead is established by consultant services based on the financial screening, application and questionnaire, and potentially an audit, and is fixed for the life of the contract. So when the contract is written, the overhead rate at the time that the contract is written, that's what the rate will be captured in the contract. So actually, I think it's the selection date. It's actually what we use. Fixed fee or profit is based on a percentage that's negotiated between 9 to 12%, and that percentage is based on duration, complexity, schedule, and size. So we start at 9% and then add on additional incremental items. For example, if we have a compressed schedule, we'll add on an additional factor with a cap of 12%. Then the fixed fee amount is calculated based on that negotiated percentage, and then the raw labor of the raw labor and the overhead. So you add the raw labor and the overhead together, and then you get that profit or fixed fee on top of that. And that amount is captured and set in the life of the contract as a maximum not to exceed amount. So the fixed fee amount is set for that contract, and there's a maximum not to exceed amount for that fixed fee, in addition to there being a contract maximum not to exceed amount. So if for some reason you were to bill over that fixed fee cap and it passed through UDOT as well, the auditors will ask for it back, because I can tell you right now they will catch that. So, terms of the contract state consultant may bill for balance of the fixed fee if they do the full scope of the work. So if the contract's canceled halfway through, you only get a prorated rate amount of the fixed fee. But if you do the full scope of work, the consultant's entitled to bill for the balance of the fixed fee. Not that they have to, but they can. Yes?
Do they tell us, I guess, how do we know what that percentage is of the fixed fee? Because we've had that happen where the project's finished early, or there's been work left off, and so we've declined or said, okay, well, we don't feel, we're not going to bill the full fixed fee for that. And a lot of times we kind of come up with our own, okay, well, you know, we were only about, you know, 2/3 of the way through, and so maybe we'll just bill a little bit of this fixed fee. Is there a specific number that we should be billing, or should they tell us what amount we can invoice?
Well, the contract actually has a dollar amount in it that's called the fixed fee amount. And if a mod comes along, it increases that. So you should be capturing, as you bill, how much you've billed out in fixed fee for a cumulative total of fixed fee you've billed out. And then there should be a maximum amount of the fixed fee that you can bill up to, so the difference is what you can bill. Now, a PM will agree that, oh, you've done the full scope of work, then you're entitled to the full fixed fee.
What if we've only done like half the amount of work?
Then it should be a prorated amount.
And so, do we
You do that. I would say it would be based on the amount of labor billed.
And we just kind of work that out with the PM.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know, you're billing. There's two ways to bill the fixed fee. You can do it as a prorated amount of the overall fixed fee, or you can pay as you go with that percentage. Just keep in mind that you can't ever go over that maximum amount of the fixed fee. So you should be tracking how much you've billed out for the fixed fee, total cumulative. So. Okay, unit price. We may only pay for individuals or items listed in the contract mod or CMS alternative staff contract. So if we have an individual that's worked on the project but is not approved on this unit price contract, we can't pay for it. So you need to make sure you do your CMS alternative staff transaction and make sure it's approved before you start sending somebody out on a project. Yes?
What is the expectation for the UDOT PMs to approve somebody that's been submitted as alternate staff as far as time frame?
It should be within 24 hours, but I don't know that they will. A phone call might be a good idea.
2 or 3 weeks isn't
appropriate? No, not really. But you can get others to approve it. If the PM's out for a week, you know, the program manager can step in and help you out with that. So maybe Dave can speak to more.
Well, I'm going to speak to that and say there is no time. They may not approve it at all.
Well, that's true.
It's up to the PM if they want to approve that team. So if you just put it in and expecting the PM to approve it, I wouldn't hold my breath. I've had that happen where the consultant just put somebody's name in and wanted it approved. They never talked to me. They've never said why. They've never done anything like that. And so I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. You need to have a conversation with me to say, why are you changing your team at this point in time? Because we agreed on this team. Now there are reasons that I would approve it if they sat down and had that conversation. But just to put it in and say, no, I didn't think that was good. So it was upon me to either call them and say, why is the change, or upon that project manager from the consultant to call me and say, hey, this is why I'm doing this, or whatever. But just because you're putting it in there, don't expect that the PM's going to see it and go right off of it.
Do they get an email?
They do get an email.
Okay. But they get inundated with those emails.
Of the 150 emails they get a day or something like that, sometimes that comes up and they're doing something and then they go on to the next. And so even if it's been a week or so and you're saying, I really need this guy to work, to me it makes sense to call and say, hey, I did this because of this. I still want to stay on track on the schedule. Can you go approve that? Oh yeah, I forgot, or what, remind me again.
So would you say a week is a favorable time frame to kind of allow them to?
Before you start making phone calls or something?
Once again, it can be done that afternoon or it can be a week. I would say that I would talk to them about it in a meeting, on a project update meeting or prior to that.
Well, and there's a difference between replacing the PM, the consultant PM, versus a CAD tech, right? Yeah. I mean, key personnel, then there should be a major conversation about it. In fact, it may jeopardize, what we selected your firm on. If you have a consultant PM leave your firm and you need to propose someone new who's equal or better, or it could cause us to cancel the contract if they're not. If it's during negotiations before we've executed the contract, we've actually gone back and conducted interviews and moved on to the second-ranked firm for those reasons. So it is a serious deal because we do qualifications-based selection, and a lot of that is based on key personnel. So, okay.
Did that answer your question?
Okay, so back to this. So unit price rate listed in the contract mod or CMS alternative transaction or lower. So even a penny more on a unit price, we have to reject it, which is pretty harsh, but the way we've agreed to with the feds. So labor by individuals after approved on the contract. We talked about that. So that's why it's so important to get those CMS alternative staff transactions submitted. This is mandatory for unit price and a good idea for cost plus. We would like you to do it for cost plus as well, but we'll still pay the invoice. Whereas on a unit price, if they have performed work before they're approved on the contract, we won't pay it ever. Okay, so don't do that. New individuals to the project is required prior to work being performed. So we just talked about that a little bit. Work task orders, this is a little bit of a nuance for work task orders. We do allow, if a person is listed on the contract, not necessarily the work task order, but the contract, we will pay for it still. But they do have to be on the base contract, mod, or CMS alternative staff transaction, even if they're not on the work task order. It would be ideal if they were, but we understand, so we'll go ahead and still approve it. Yes?
I had one kick back to me the other day because they weren't on the work task order, but they had been included as far as new staff. They were brand new staff, new employee.
And they'd have been approved to the contract?
I'm going to say yes.
Okay. Then we can work that out with you. It might be a misunderstanding on behalf of our side, so.
Okay, but if they weren't, and if they weren't, they don't get paid for. I understand
right.
that. But with that, I guess, and in this case, it was an on-call contract. So how do we go back and add them if they are a new employee?
There's a CMS alternative staff transaction within CMS to add a new employee to an existing contract without having to go through a full-fledged mod to the contract. It's just as there is on a regular contract.
So is that on the on-calls also?
Mm-hmm. Now, it's a little harder to add it to a work task order, so we don't require that, like I said. But the base contract or mod or CMS alternative staff transaction, they have to be added to one of those.
Okay. So if it's for the work task order, it needs to be added to the on-call.
Correct.
Is where the addition needs to happen.
Correct. I mean, if you're adding money in addition to the work task order, then we'd prefer that you add the person to the on-call and then include them on the work task order mod. But if you're not changing the work task order otherwise, then you can just add them to the base contract, okay? Through a CMS alternative staff transaction, okay? So, is that clear as mud? Lump sum, used when the scope is fully defined and not likely to change due to a third party. It's billed by percentage of contract complete. The only backup, well, there's one addition to this. There's 4 pieces of documentation. There's the payment request form, there's the consultant invoice, progress report, and now the new form that UDOT has to fill out for the authorization of payment. Okay, and we don't use lump sums too much because we rarely scope down to the level that a lump sum would require. So we have examples of all 3 fee type invoices on our website. Website is at udot.utah.gov/go/CS forms. That's where all the forms are. And it's within your documentation somewhere. So, but we have examples of those 3 fee types along with the backup documentation of labor reports. So here I've cut off the top and the bottom here and just showing you the cost plus fixed fee model. So you can see gym floor for 4 hours at $70 an hour, and then you can see the raw labor total for that particular individual, on down to Susie Q at 1 hour for $20 an hour. Those are the actual raw labor rates. And then you get a subtotal. Then you subtotal all of those amounts to get a total raw labor amount. And then you add in the overhead. That's the 150%. That's the amount that's set in the contract. And then you total those two together, and then you calculate in the fixed fee on top of that for a total of $5,777.55. So that's the model for a fixed cost plus fixed fee. For unit price, the unit price rate includes the raw labor, the overhead, and the profit all into one labor rate. So it's a billable rate or a loaded rate that's negotiated and set in the contract. So if I'd done this correctly, it would actually add up to the same amount down here because the hours are the same. But the unit price is, I just pulled out of the air, so don't try and cross-check with me. So anyway, gym floor, 4 hours at $160 an hour. You get the $640, and you add it all down. And you can see at the bottom, we don't add in the profit at the end and the overhead because it's already calculated in each of the labor rates. So that's the unit price, the difference. Plus, you're not billing actuals, you're billing the negotiated set rate or lower. We'll accept lower if you want to do that. People usually don't, but that's okay. And then the lump sum billing model, so say the contract's $10,000 and we're 80% complete with that contract. So the total earned to date should be $8,000. They had a previous progress report, progress payment of $2,000. So the current billing is $6,000 for a total of $8,000. So you can see the current invoice amount is $6,000. So no rates, no nothing like that. So, yes?
We need to let them know that on the ODCs, when it's a lump sum, we would like for you guys to keep track of it because I've been having quite a few that's coming in, and it's a lump sum and it's an ODC. But they're billing me 2 or 3 times, and each time they're billing me, it's for what the lump sum amount was for, like for $3,500 or whatever. And that's really supposed to be the total of it, not for each invoice.
Right. You shouldn't have incremental like that. You should have a percentage complete on the overall contract, not how much complete you are on mileage and how much complete you are on each of the tasks.
I'm sorry, PEC, I'm picking on you, but I don't need to. We're just going to say PEC sends in one and they have John Doe here, and they're invoicing me for a lump sum. So the first one was like 25, and the lump sum that shows in the screen that I look at, it says 35. So I paid him 25 here, but then my next invoice, I'm getting another invoice for 35. So now I've overpaid what that lump sum amount was in the contract.
Well, you're not because you're going to reject it.
I know, but I would like all the consultants to kind of start watching that and know what's in the contract. And if your lump sum is X amount of dollars, that's all the work you really should be having your consultants do or your subs do. And kind of watching that.
Well, there's a well-defined scope of work, so you should know as a consultant exactly what you're agreeing to for that $10,000. And if they're asking for you to do additional things and you're willing to do that with no additional cost, that's fine. But if you're expecting additional payment, then there has to be a mod, and we don't like to do mods on lump sum. That defeats the whole purpose of doing a lump sum contract, because the work should be fully defined. We shouldn't have to do a mod on a lump sum. So that's why we don't do a lot of lump sum contracts. Okay, so let's move on to dates. Notice to proceed dates and expiration dates. So notice to proceed is defined as when the consultant is authorized to begin work by consultant services, not the project manager just saying, go ahead. That doesn't work. It's got to be by consultant services or through our contract management system. Work performed prior to the contract NTP cannot be approved for payment. And there's really nothing we can do to say, you know, oh, I'm so sorry we did work before the NTP. Is there any way we can get paid? The answer's going to be no. That's just a flat no. We do have an early NTP process, but we don't use it too often. If we go through that, then yes. But other than that, and that's considered a authorized NTP by consultant services. Okay. Work performed on a work task order prior to the work task order NTP date. We can't pay for that either. So even if the base contract or on-call contract has a notice to proceed, you have to wait for the NTP on the work task order for any work to be performed. Unless you want to just donate, we're welcome to do that, but we don't expect that. Why are we so rigid about that? Funds may not yet be authorized by FHWA, could jeopardize our funding. The contract terms have not been agreed to by all parties and may not, as far as we know. It violates our Code of Federal Regulations. I shouldn't say our, I should say the Code of Federal Regulations. And it violates the contract terms and conditions if we make a payment for that. Expiration dates. May not bill for work after the expiration date. They'll stop paying, these job share folk. A date extension modification may be required, but keep in mind, we will not authorize a date extension for an on-call contract. That is set in stone, the expiration date of an on-call contract. However, we do allow a 3-month buffer on the work task order expiration date. So, yes.
Is that why, as I've been seeing, it seems as if the work task order expiration dates are pretty much exactly 3 months?
And they absolutely will be. Because it's pre-calculated based on the request date of the project manager for that contract. So it's all measured from the PM request date. We give an approximate 30 days for that to be executed. That's just an approximation. If the consultant doesn't put their information in for 6 months, that eats into the amount of time that you can actually perform the work. But so a month for approximately for request to NTP, 12 months approximately, or actually 13 months exactly from the request date to the work task order expiration date, and then 3 months after that will be the contract expiration date. So when we hit the work task order expiration date, no new modifications that increase the dollar amount, no new work task orders may be issued. We will allow negative mods to work task orders during that 3-month period. Work can still be performed on work that's already been established in work task orders, but the contract expiration date on a on-call contract, we won't allow you to do any work after that. Or you can, but we won't pay you. So, yes?
So the first bullet point where it says may not bill for work performed after contract expiration date. So when we're talking about billing, so are we talking about the work performed date, or we're talking about it's gone through accounting and
the work performed date.
Okay. So
You can, because it would be impossible to bill, the day that you've done the work, right? So the contract expiration date, we'll still pay the bill after that, the 45 days, but we won't allow you to do any work after the expiration date. Well, we'll let you, but we won't pay you.
I'm confused on what the 3 months is.
It's just a buffer. We were having too many times when we were wanted exceptions to be able to do work after the expiration date. So we gave you that 3-month buffer and said, okay, you can do new work task orders up to that date, but you have to have all the work done by the end of those 3 months. So it's just a buffer period. And you can't do any new work task orders during that, so they should age out after that. So modifications. Modifications are required prior to performing the work. Questions on that? Okay.
Everybody's giggling.
Yeah.
I know why everybody's giggling.
I knew you were going to say something.
I know I was, and I'm leaving too, so I won't say anything after this. Everybody's giggling because they say, well, yeah, but the PM's asked me to do that work, and we don't have the mod in, and I need to do it. And so we just go ahead and do it. That's the wrong thing. The right thing is to work as a team. So you should be having PMs that are talking to the consultants, and the consultants should be talking to the PMs, and you should be having that conversation well in advance of the mod being done. Should. There are times that something comes up that was totally unexpected that a mod needs to be done for. Guess what? It can be done. I've done an entire contract from beginning to notice to proceed in 2 hours before. Did it once. A mod can be done that way if it needs to be done. You can still go through the processes. What happened was, as I had a PM, had something came up very fast. I called Ben, Lisa back then. Lisa, I've got this issue. Are you going to be okay with it? Yes, I'll get Gay and her people ready to go. You put it in the system. You have the consultant put their stuff in the system. We'll get it through our stuff. We'll sign it. We'll kick it back to have the consultant sign it. And it was all done in 2 hours. It can be done, but it has to be a total team effort. So if that comes up in this region, the PM should be having a conversation with Brent, and Brent can use his great influence to make it happen. Should it happen often? It shouldn't happen very often, but it can be done. So when people say, oh, we couldn't because, no, you didn't because, is what my usual answer is. So please, if a PM asks you to do that, please say, I'm happy to do that. Let's get a mod going right now, because if it's that important, then let us get it done before we do the work on it.
Because if you do work prior to the NTP of the mod, you're doing it at risk, and there are occasions when that mod will not go through at all, because for certain reasons. It's outside the scope. It's after the expiration date on a non-call contract, or certain reasons that may come up where we can't process that mod at all, let alone in the time you need it done.
So work with your PM. You have the right, really, to make sure you have a contract to do the work before you do the work. You really do. So I won't say any more.
Maximum not to exceed amount is the amount authorized by the contract or the work task order, and you can't go over that amount without a modification. Can't exceed it. There may be reasons why we can't do a mod. For example, if you're at $149,999 and it's a direct select contract, we can't do a mod on that. So, keep that in mind and plan ahead. If a project manager approaches you and you know full well that this contract is going to be over $150,000, you need to tell them that. Don't go into details, but say, you know what, I don't think there's any way we can realistically do this for under $150,000. And then they'll go back to the drawing board and potentially revisit the selection method. And then maybe do an RPLOC and invite you. But if you've gone to the nth degree on negotiations and you come down to it's $162,532.67, you know way too much about that contract to be invited to an RPLOC at that point. So keep that in mind, that you might be essentially bowing out by doing those negotiations. Okay, questions on that? Okay. So consultants are required to QA your own payment requests before you send them to us. That will actually grease the wheels for you to get your payments done much faster. If we don't have to kick it back, that's all that time of communication and delays that won't happen. If you follow that payment request guide and look through that and the tools that we've offered, obviously there's errors on occasion. We understand that. But the run-of-the-mill ones should be taken care of by your own QA. That make sense? Okay. So we're going to cross-check accuracy between these documents. So we have the UDOT payment request, we have the consultant invoice, we have the new consultant payment authorization form, we have the contracts modification CMS alternative staff transaction, we have labor reports, we have receipts for travel, direct expenses, etc. We have sub-consultant invoices and mileage logs. All of that information we're going to cross-check for consistency between those documents. And also for accuracy, we're going to spot check up to 10 to 20% for calculations. Unit price, every individual is going to be checked, their rates, etc. So keep that in mind. Direct expenses on the payment request form and on your invoice, you should show your work product. So number of units times rate per unit. So you can show what unit you're actually charging for the number of units. Equals an amount. So we can see on a unit price, yes, you use the correct rate, or do we have to back calculate it? You know, all that stuff takes time. Granted, for one calculations, it's not a big deal, but think about just all the consultants in this room, let alone all the projects those consultants have and all those contracts that are associated. So don't forget hotel bills, mileage logs, sub-consultant invoices, those are all required. Local government contract, just a tip. You can actually send it to the local and UDOT at the same time, electronically. We prefer electronic, by the way, in case you're wondering, thinking you have to turn it in hard copy. We prefer electronic. We have added a new tool, thanks to a couple folks in our Region 2 office. In CMS, when there is consultant docs on a contract, we've added a new item called Invoice Verification. You guys have access to this too as well on your contracts. So if you click on the consultant docs and then you click on that button called Invoice Verification, it takes you to another screen that shows you all the individuals that have been approved on the contract. And I've put a white out here because it's had actual contract rates, but the rate of pay will be in here and the approval date. So if they were approved on a CMS alternative staff transaction, it will tell you the date that they were actually approved. So you can actually cross-check with yourself on your own contracts. So it'll have the list of the names, the hours, the rates, and the approval date. And then if you click on where that red button, that red arrow is, where it says Show ODC Items, it's a toggle button, and you can toggle over and see the ODC items on that contract. So you can see this particular one had boards at $2 each. So if this is a unit price contract, it isn't. But if it were, you could see you can't charge more than $2 on those types of items. Is that the same thing on the unit price for the individuals? Yes?
So this is just a kind of a verification tool as you're preparing the invoice, not necessarily showing an invoice that's been submitted.
Correct. Electronic invoicing is something that we would love to have but do not have yet. This is a step towards that, a tool that, that you can use. Okay, it's available to our project managers as well, and they're using it. So it's nice to have for those folks that are preparing invoices. Okay.
One other question.
Yes.
On say like an ODC item where you're say you've input a number of tests that are going to be run, and you're having somebody else run those. And the contract states that, okay, it's, let's say, $20 a test or something. Sometimes we've had where the sub that we're using to run those, their costs will sometimes come in at maybe 18 a test, or sometimes at 22, 23. Do we?
Is it if we're talking cost plus? That's okay. If it's cost plus, you're okay. If your unit price, that materials test is set for that amount.
Okay, so even on something like this, where we've contracted for a certain rate, if it's cost plus, we use the rate that we're...
The actuals. You use actuals on a cost plus, and you're stuck with the rates you negotiated on a unit price. Yes?
If there's something like that and the charge comes through higher than was estimated on the cost proposal, is there some kind of preference that you would like to see come through with the invoice? So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll flag that and tell my PM, hey, we show this ODC is this, but
you know, is coming through at this, and he says, oh yeah, I talked to the PM about that, it'll go through. And
Is it, as long as it's reasonable?
it does, because the PM's aware of it, but occasionally our PM's aware of it, the UDOT PM's aware of it, and then Vicky will get it, and she'll say, hey, this is higher than your amount.
And on a cost plus.
Mhm. And so then I have
She
to
can
just
ask,
send
but
an email, you know, and usually they'll have an email correspondence between our PM and the UDOT PM. Would it be better just to, there's already so much in those invoices, I don't wanna add more than what is useful, but would it be better just to like acquire and include that document?
That seems like overkill, because I think probably you're only going to get that. I don't know, Artie, what do you want to speak to that?
I'm gonna tell you one or two things, okay? I'm gonna question it. If you have it and your test is $20 and it's coming through at 45, and I don't have anything noted on that invoice, I am going to question it to make sure that the PM has looked at it, that he's okay, that we're doubling the cost. But if it's approved between you guys and the PMs, if you just put a note on there, a handwritten note saying that it's approved by your PM and my PM, at least that way, I know you guys have talked to it. If it's something that's going to happen all the time, our PMs, once they get that email, they will actually put it in project-wise under our invoicing folder, so that the auditors can actually go back and see, yes, the PM did approve that price. So it depends on you know, how much we're talking about and how many times is it gonna happen. Do we wanna email in there sometimes, but at least put a note on the invoice so that I can see that you guys are talking about it.
But there's a difference between moving from a $20 test to a $45 test, from a $20 test to a $21 test.
If it's like a 21, 22, you're probably okay not to.
But and then provided if asked for. Yeah, so, but that's in regards to cost plus fixed fee, unit price, different thing. You've negotiated and set that rate. You can bill lower but not higher. Okay. So anyway, on this invoice review screen, you can toggle back and forth between ODC items and employees. And there's also an item there that you can print the invoice verification. So if you're going to take it home and do whatever you do, whatever, that's fine too. And then if you look in the upper right-hand corner of that screen, it'll have the selection method, it'll also have the fee type, and then it'll have the percentage if it's a cost plus fixed fee. I've whited out the actual rates because this is a real contract, but it'll have the overhead rate that's been approved on that contract as well, because it may be different than what you're currently putting in new contracts. If it's an older, 2 or 3 years old, it could be a big difference on your overhead rate. So, questions on that? Okay. As I said, that everybody has access to that invoice verification for your contracts. So you can use it as a tool. I would use the payment request guide as a tool as well. They said you don't have to look at it, but you really do need to comply with everything that's in there because that's what they're checking. So why not do it the first time? That's all I'd say. Wouldn't you say? Yeah. So, any other questions before we change topics? Yes?
What is the calculus for the percent work and percent time?
Say that again?
How do we calculate the percent work and the percent time? Is that for example, percent time, is that a measure of NTP versus the end date of the contract?
Yes.
Or is that a function of, okay, so it's not if we budgeted 1,000 hours and we spent 100 hours.
No, it's the time of the dates, yeah. And then the amount billed, that's the amount actually, the labor and everything, how much. If you've billed out 90% of the hours, that's 90% then of the work.
I think the example online gives you how to calculate those.
Right. And like I said, there are examples of all those 3 fee types. And the payment request form, there's an example of that as well. The example does still have that UDOT signature on the bottom, but that's all we changed, so yeah, so far anyway. Yes? Brett?
Cost plus fixed fee, we're up to where we're going over the contract amount. How do you want us to handle that? We don't expect a contract mod, it's just a question of...
Well, you need to note it, and the reason why I say that is if the auditors find something that's unallowable that you billed for, you want to make a note of things that are allowable so you can offset that.
What we've done in the past is we've billed the full amount, but then we've shown a thing on our invoice reducing it down to the amount.
Yes, that would work. Or you can match the dollar amount and then show an unbilled amount that you're calculating. And like I said, the reason why you want to capture that information that's over the maximum that you don't intend to bill for is, let's say you overbilled your fixed fee amount.
It's happened in the past, that's why you definitely want to do it.
So you want to offset that amount that they're going to ask for back by allowable bills that you didn't bill for.
Okay, what should we do if we are, based upon the percentage, we're at 100%, yet we're still working on the project, so we expect more bills to come through?
You would put a note on the.
So we wouldn't mark it final, but we should still.
No, definitely don't mark it final, because these guys they'll pay it and they'll close it.
As long as you mark it final, then you're okay with us doing 100%.
Well, you would need a note.
Yeah, you would need to put a note.
Or do 99. Wait 90%.
Well, you could do that, but they're going to count that as, they're going to round up to 100. So put a note somewhere on the payment request form.
But to keep the 45-day thing, you would rather us go ahead and bill, we just need to go ahead and bill that rather than hold it off until later.
Yeah, especially if you're going to go over year end, which happens occasionally. So, any other? Oh, sorry.
So you addressed the differences on the ODC amounts. I most often have questions on an ODC item that isn't in the cost proposal at all. They didn't anticipate they were going to have
for
such and such.
For a cost plus
Or
fixed
cost
fee,
plus fixed fee.
that is possible if you get approval from the UDOT project manager and they need to make special approval on the form. So, that they've gone ahead and it was needed for the project and make a note of that. Unit price, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do.
Okay, so what do I as the...
You have to have your project manager make a note and make sure that it's relayed to our project manager.
Okay.
And Gay, on those, it's nice if you guys do that before, that when we're doing the invoicing and we're kicking it back, because now we have these ODCs that's not on the contract, it's nice to have that done before instead of once we catch it.
It delays the payment.
We're talking about it.
Yeah. It's possible on a cost plus fixed fee. There's nothing we can do for unit price.
Even if the UDOT PM says...
Doesn't matter. It has to be modded into the contract before it happens. So, and we say the average time although we said 2 hours, the norm is about a month. So keep that in mind. Not to say we can't do it faster, but,
You said you could do it in 2 hours.
we can, but we probably won't. That's if all the planets align and, all the stars,
When does the clock start ticking on that 45-day requirement? Is it from the time that...
From the time that period ends, so the month end,
So if we're, accruing mileage in March and that becomes a payable in April, does that go on our April pay request or does that have to go back to our March pay request?
It should go with your March pay request, but if it's going to delay things a month, we don't want to do that. So we'll allow it on the April. But you'll get the Arties of the world upset because now they have to look back at your March one to find the labor that happened to correspond with your mileage. So it's preferable if you bill it all in the same month. Yes?
So what we do in those situations, and I haven't had one kicked back, so I'm assuming it's acceptable, is at the time I'm billing the labor, then I'll just photocopy the detail of that and then include that with the next month's invoice and say,
This is
labor was
just
billed
for-
last month and
That
now here's
works.
the mileage.
Okay.
So
That works all the time except for at year end.
Right.
Year end's the only time we can accept the
That's- yeah.
mileage on a separate month, so.
Okay. Last burning questions on payment requests before we move topics?
We have had a request to add a line to the pay request form for your fixed fee amounts so that you can put in a cumulative amount in
That's
there.
been billed out for your fixed fee.
So if you guys
something
think that that's a good idea, then just let us know.
So it would keep you from billing over with the...
So it would be a separate line item on your pay request form.
Now for something completely different. Do you guys know where that reference is from? Yes. Okay. Mods to solicitations, that's the RFQs, RPLOCs, RLOIs, those contracts. Work must be within the original scope of work, of the scope that was advertised. So you can't just throw in, oh, you know what, we did an EA, we're just going to fully design the contract. You know, it's fully design that project. That doesn't work. Or we're going to double the terminal. We're going to do twice as long. That wasn't in the original. Can't just add it in. Doesn't work that way. So, especially when you're changing technical skill sets. So if you say we're doing the design of the contract, oh, we're just going to mod in the construction engineering management. Doesn't work that way, okay? So you and your project manager should be taking a look at the original scope to see if it fits within that scope of work before you just assume that that mod can happen. Now there may be exceptions where it might be able to, if there's a good enough reason, or if it's you know, if it's fair and equitable to other consultants, then potentially we might be able to do something about it. But. Okay, so this is fairly new within the last few years. Communication during solicitation advertisements. So that's the RFQs, RPLOCs, RLOIs. Please do not make any phone calls or emails directly to your project managers once it hits the streets. So Utah code says it's against the law for our selection team members to talk to you about the project. But we've reversed it in the solicitations and said it's against the solicitation for you guys to talk to us about it. We do make the exception of one-on-ones for solicitations. However, for RPLOCs, we don't do one-on-ones. You can send questions in to consultant services if you have a question about an RPLOC after it's gone out. But don't send the question directly to the project manager. That can get you disqualified. Okay? Questions on that? That wasn't our ID. They changed the code, so we have to comply. But you can talk to consultant services anytime during business hours. Okay? Don't call me at midnight. I'm not going to answer. We've added a new requirement, or fairly new requirement, that you have to add your schedules to CMS. And the reason we did that is because in consultant services we were trying to hunt down the schedules, and it's not, you know, the norm. So everything that's in CMS is now approved. When a UDOT project manager moves the contract from negotiations to info pending, they're approving your schedule, your scope, your schedule. I mean your budget. So yes.
Does that include work task order schedules?
No.
Or do you send those separately?
Yeah, and it, I didn't know that they were doing separate schedules for work task orders. Oh, okay. Wow. We don't require this for on-calls or date extensions. Yes?
Does the schedule need to be in a particular format aside from PDF? Does that have to be a...
Well, for a design project, it should be an MS project schedule. If it's like for PI, no, a Gantt chart's preferable, but PDF, it has to be in PDF. And we will expect it to, on every mod as well, except for, like I said, for on-call mods and for date extension mods. And the reason we don't require it on date extensions is because it doesn't have consultant docs associated with a date extension. It's just the one-page form. We don't have the capability to add it to that, at least
So
without a lot more programming.
Schedule, we just have to...
Well, that's between you and your project manager. Consultant services is out on that one.
So what if we're doing a contract mod that doesn't exchange the date? Why do we have to send in another schedule that basically shows exactly the same date?
Because you might have task changes.
No.
They might change your critical path. And it may not, but you can just add the same one if that's what, if it hasn't changed.
Okay.
And that's fine. But just keep in mind, if you've added tasks, you should be doing a new schedule.
Okay.
Okay? That's it. Questions? Concerns? Issues? No? Any other questions outside of this?
I have one question about CMS. So this time of year is typically when the hassle is reminded to me, but I don't like how it makes you jump to your alphabetically first employee after you save an employee record.
That's something that you can make a recommendation in an email, because and show me screenshots of what you're talking about,
Okay.
so we can give that to our programmer.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, typically this time of year is when we're doing our pay rate changes, and so when we have to go into hundreds of people and
then
pull
you
up
have to
that
go back
record,
down
we get
to-
down to Starkey and change his rate and jumps us right back up to Adams, and then we have to scroll all the way down again. And
It's just the problems with so many employees. smaller
Anyways,
firms, it's
that's-
more user-friendly.
Yeah.
Sorry. Any other questions? But go ahead and make that recommendations, because we're always looking for ways to improve, so. Yes.
This new form,
Yes.
do we provide it blank or fill in, but this, okay, that will be
Those are for the
reviewed by
PMs.
UDOT.
Those are for the UDOT PMs.
They'll only give it to you if the, yeah.
Okay.
You can do it if you want to, but they're going to probably, have their own version of it with, some of their information preloaded, like what region it is or whatever. So,
Okay. Thanks.
any other questions?